ask each of you where you think the tradition of propaganda is most vibrant and alive today.
I would say it's most alive in presidential campaigning, where the candidates find themselves forced to eliminate all complexity from their answers to any question, knowing that if they do, one side or another of what they say will be exaggerated by their opponent. This is how complexity is kept out of discussion when it is complexity that we need.
Masha, short answer.
I would agree, and I would point to the United States, because actually, interestingly, in Russia, the government has been so successful at shutting down public debate that we can see a lot of the ideas that perhaps originate there show up here and be taken to greater heights.
Constantine?
Oh, it's alive and well everywhere where power is at stake. The more power is at stake, the more propaganda is going to be used. So if you have regimes in which a change of government means a radical change of personnel, do expect a lot of propaganda.
George?
I think that the war on terror is an extremely powerful metaphor, a false metaphor. It's a false metaphor, but even if you explain it and people understand it, they say, well, but how else do you talk about it? What other frame can you propose? And it's extremely difficult to provide an alternative to it. In fact, I spent a lot of time thinking about it, and it's after I wrote my book that the idea came up, human security. It's interestingly, if you think of, how do you deal with terrorism, and you say you want to make people safe, then it's different from the war on terror, and totally different methods are needed. So it's an extremely difficult, an extremely powerful metaphor, and even though the public has now recognized that the war of the invasion of Iraq was a terrible disaster, the war on terror is still the prevailing metaphor. It's still the metaphor in which Hillary Clinton is couching her campaign, and until we break that mold, I think we are caught.
In regard to China, I would simply point out that the Central Propaganda Department, in English only, has changed its name to the Publicity Department under the influence of public relations. So you have a kind of a parallel universe here of, in China, propaganda is okay. They recognize we don't really like the name of the word or the meaning of the word, and they've changed the name for our purposes. All right, Andras, questions?
We have so many wonderful thoughts on the stage. We do want to leave a few minutes, and our friends at the library have said that we can go on for about another 15. If you're okay with that, we did get off to a late start. A great number of questions came through, so I've taken the liberty of putting some of them together in groups. One of them goes like this. It strikes me that the current newspeak differs from Orwell's newspeak in that while Orwell's fictional propagandists omitted words like freedom, today the idea is to overuse words like freedom or terror, so that they become nebulous and finally meaningless. Another related comment is, how is the imperative of repetition effective, helps make propaganda effective? And related to that, in your assessment, how effective has the propaganda of the Bush administration been in recent years? You can take it wherever you want it.
Who would like to try that one?
I'll take a shot. I think that the word in that group that is most widely misused is, and I agree here with George Soros, the word war. We've seen that word used previously in our society. We've had war on crime. We've had war on drugs. There, it seems that we retained in the back of our minds the recollection, the awareness that this word was being metaphorically used. The first time that I heard this expression was in a moment when I'd been asked to join a group of people who were writing for the publication of the Authors Guild. And I said, this is a very powerful and mobilizing metaphor, and you cannot deny a government the right to employ metaphor. But let's hope that this is not taken literally, and that we don't actually begin a war because of so small a provocation. This was not the equivalent of Pearl Harbor, where we had a major nation with a massive army that had already seized a great deal of territory, occupied half of China, engaging in a comparable conflict with us. It called for something much smaller. The word war was a very treacherous metaphor to employ without careful control, and look what happened.
I mean, we may take some small pleasure in the fact that we have the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, the most undemocratic nation in the world, or we have the People's Republic of this, that, and the other, that in fact these words have gotten to a state where they have to be used even though they're totally redefined and debased. Maybe that should be considered as some small progress, but then we end up, of course, with the whole idea that the meaning is utterly manipulated. It's mutated into a totally different definition.
Next two questions. Oh, you have a comment? Yeah.
Meanings are important. Under communism, we used to say that the word socialist is a transformative adjective. Socialist freedom means lack of freedom. Socialist prosperity means poverty, and so on and so forth. However, it turned out that the regime can use this game as well. The law on censorship, which was passed in '81 by the then still communist Polish parliament, and we considered that a success because the word censorship was used, was merged with the law on the media and renamed law on the freedom of the media, and it was passed in '84. So basically, he who uses the terms first can define them. And to the extent that the person, the entity that defines those words also has control over the media, his meaning stands.
Our next two questions, and we only have time for a few more, but these two actually restore my faith in the science, or certainly of graphology. We have two comments, almost exactly the same handwriting, asking a very similar question. Is the problem today not the end of ideology and the absence of ideas rather than propaganda? Empty rhetoric leaves us uninspired and disengaged, says one. The other, couldn't we perhaps do with some more propagandistic ideas in policies, challenging and provocative ideas that seek to question our problems and help us deal with them?
I'll answer the last one, yes.
Yes. Okay. Okay, question for Mr. Gebert. This is, I think, probably from a younger audience members. What imprint do you see the internet and bloggers are having on so-called underground politics? Have you ever thought whether you would be blogging away if you were doing what you did 25 years ago?
This is a fascinating question. If you'll allow me 2 minutes to answer it, I think it's extremely important. I've been trying to support the democratic movement in Belarus, and one of the weird things that did not happen in Belarus is they do not have an underground media. The technological potential is there. There are about 50,000 trainers next door in Poland willing to train people who would not know how to do underground printing, and there is no underground printing. Why? Because there's the internet. I mean, we started producing the underground newspapers because we didn't have what we wanted to read. The fact that this was a social service, as it were, was an added bonus. Well, the 10% in Belarus that is unhappy with the state of the media and has access to internet can satisfy its needs through internet, through surfing, through blogging, therefore does not engage in much